So first off, thank you for joining me today. We will be making an oven mitt from beginning to end. We're going to talk about the two different sizes that we have, and some of the things that you're going to need to be able to make this project is, of course, you're going to need some fabric, a couple of fat quarters. You're going to need enough to be able to make your outer fabric. You're going to cut two, and then you're going to need enough for your lining. You're going to need some cotton batting. I use cotton batting. And you're going to need some Insulbrite or the Bolso Polytherm. You're going to need that. That is the insulating feature. Now, I think if you don't have that, you could just probably do a couple layers of batting. It's just going to not be as probably as protective as if you use the Polytherm or the Insulbrite. Now, some clips, they could be useful for this project. Some clips, I use the precision scissors. I use those for clipping and trimming, particularly in the thumb area. Pinking shears, you're going to need some pinking shears. Another feature that I like to use, or product I use, is a basting spray or the basting powder. It kind of holds all of my layers together when I'm doing my quilting. Rotary cutter, and of course the template. Martelli has two templates. We have the child size and the large size. If you happen to get them both, because they are so close and so identical, go ahead and mark it. Like this one, I wrote A for adult. This one here, I wrote C for child. When you open up, they actually will have written instructions inside. Plus, you'll be able to watch a video online. So here are the two sizes. I'm going to make the adult size today, but I'm going to show you there is a little bit difference in the size. So here's an adult side by side. Here is a child size. They look pretty similar, but there is more room in the adult one than there is in the child one. But the child one, you could also even make it smaller, as you saw earlier. If you just take a 1/2 of an inch instead of just a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, it'd probably bring it in just a little bit smaller. Now, I wanted to talk about a couple of things that's really important when you're making these. There's really two ways to do these. You could cut all of your pieces out and then layer them up and do some free motion, not free motion quilting, or just some quilting on them. Or you could take a piece of fabric and have it layered up and then do your quilting. So how you would do that, I'm going to show you this one here first. This one here is where I had layered my batting first, then my Insulbrite here, and then I put my fabric on top. So that's how you want to layer these up. If you're going to be cutting out all the pieces and all the components at once, you're going to cut out two. You're going to have mirror images. You got to have the mirror images. You just can't cut out on the bright side and then cut out again on the right side, because it's not going to work. You've got to have the mirror image. So if you're going to use the template and just cut one out at a time, you're going to cut on one side of the fabric, and then you're going to flip the fabric over and you're going to cut another one. You got to have the mirror images so you need two outer pieces, two lining pieces, two pieces of batting, and two pieces of the Insulbrite. And you got to have the mirror images on every one. So you can either do that by stacking up your fabric, or just by being sure to flip the fabrics over as you cut out each one. Now, to layer them up, just like I'm showing right here, you're going to have your Insulbrite, you're going to have your batting, and then you're going to put your fabric on top. I like to have my fabric, the wrong side of my fabric, on the bright side of the Insulbrite or the Bolso Polytherm. I think that's where it's more heat reflective. Now, I'm going to show you why this one's all quilted before I would have cut this one out. The reason for that, I found that if you was to cut these out, all the pieces, and then layer them up and then quilting, if you're going to be doing a lot of quilting, I mean, I'm talking about lots of stitching, very close together, really detailed into that quilting, what you're going to find happen is it's going to take that size of it, of the outer pieces, not the lining so much, but the outer pieces, and it's going to kind of draw it in. It's going to shrink it in size. So then when you go to put it on, it might not fit you properly, or the lining is going to show itself to be much larger than the outer piece. So I found that if you go ahead and take your fabric, if you're going to do one with a lot of quilting, go ahead and layer your fabrics up and just quilt your whole fat quarter piece. I mean, just completely get it quilted like I did here. And after I had it all done, all quilted, then I'm laying my template on here. I'm going to grab and I'm going to lay my template on here, and I'm going to cut it out. There are cut lines in the Martelli template right here where your rotary cutter can go into here. If you're not comfortable with that, you could actually trace that with a pencil and cut that out with scissors. I also recommend that you use, I think the 28 millimeter works really well, but when you're cutting through a lot of layers like this, you might have to go to the 45, but you might have a little trouble getting that 45 around some of these curves. So you might want to draw that and cut it with scissors. But if you're going to be doing a lot of quilting on your piece, go ahead and quilt your project, which is layering the batting, the Insulbright, and the fabric on top, and quilt that first before you actually cut out your pieces. Now, if you're just going to do some freeform quilting, like you see what I have done here, here's an example where I just did just straight stitches. I could have done some wavy lines. That's not drawing in my project all that much. It's not really shrinking it in size. So this way I can go ahead and cut all of my pieces and layer them up, and then go ahead and go to my machine and get them all quilted up together. So these are just some examples. We were talking about how a lot of times we think of these as just a seasonal item, but you know, we do things, we cook all throughout the year. So if you collect, you know, Mickey Mouse, or if you just have some kids you want to make some things for, if you want a real florally, a springy one, you could just do all kinds of different colorways and all kinds of different gifts that you could make with these. Now, here I've already got some that are pre-cut. I went ahead and got some of my work done. So I got my 2 mirror images of my Insulbright, and I already have my batting already cut. And I'm making the adult size right now. So here's my adult one. When you get your template, if you're going to be using your cut line, go ahead and get your rotary cutter in here and get it pre-cut for you. Here's my lining. I just chose this purple. I found it easier if I go ahead and take my fabric and I just lay them right sides together and then cut it out, because all I have to do is just take it to my sewing machine and sew around. And I sew all the way around 1/4 inch, and I leave an opening about 2 inches or so right here on this straight edge. So this is where my opening is on this straight edge. This is the technique that I'm showing you. There is another technique where you could completely sew it all the way around and then just leave this open, and you could use what is it called? You can bind the bottom. But I'm showing you the one where you're stitching and flipping, so you won't even have to bind it. It kind of gives you a faux binding right here. You can top stitch this if you want, but I kind of like this look right here, and that's a lot of layers that you're going through, so I don't want to do that extra wear and tear on my machine and just kind of leave it where it's open, you know, where it's not, kind of gives it a real pretty look here, particularly if you do, you know, like something that was really bright. It just gives it a really pretty look right here, like by not putting that top stitching horn. But you can top stitch this all the way around. Now, this is the fabric that I'm going to use for today's project. This was my lining, so I've already cut it out and I've already sewn it all the way around, right sides together, leaving a 2-inch opening right here, because this is where I'm going to turn it out. These two already cut, and I actually used a small amount of basting spray, just a light spritzing, and I layered my batting to the back of my Insulbright right here, just a light spritzing with my basting spray. So the only thing left is for me to go ahead and cut my top piece, and I'm going to lay this here on top. I'm kind of taking a peek. I want to kind of keep one of those guitars to be right there in the middle. This would have been a template that could have been cute with a fussy cut window. All right, so I'm just going to cut all the way around. Now here's another thing. If you're working with a directional fabric, just remember you want to be able to have it going in the right direction. I recommend a non-directional. This one has a little bit of a directional, but it's going up and down. So just pay attention also to the fabrics that you're using and the direction that you're using. I am going to go ahead and use my 28 because I am only cutting 2 layers of fabric here, so it would be really easy to do. I'm not having to worry about right sides or wrong sides because these are going to be put onto the Insulbright. So then we'll go to the machine and we'll be quilting them. So I just kind of follow this edge around. Being careful to keep your hands out of the way. And I'm going to go right into that cut line. Then I'm going to come back into that cut line from behind and then just move forward. Should pull that piece right out. And then the last bit right here. There you go. And that's all there is to it. Easy peasy. So here's the two pieces that I had earlier done. So I'm going to grab the coordinating one that's going to go like this. I'm going to make sure it's the one that goes onto the bright here. It's only going to be able to fit on one way. Like in that look right there. So you can clip this or you can use a little bit of basting spray, and I just kind of touch just a couple little spots. It's going to be enough for me to hold it down because I'm not doing this great heavy-duty quilting here. You can clip this, but I'm just going to hold, it's just giving it just enough pressure that I need because I'm just going to just do some random lines going across it. Again, here's my batting, Insul Bright, and my last piece of fabric. Just a couple of spots. And then I just match it up and press it into place. All right, so I am going to go to the sewing machine and we're just going to do some stitching going across all these little areas. It's going to hold all these pieces down. And at the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and grab my lining. We'll have that ready to go too. I am sewing on an M7 and I have my HP foot on today because I am actually going through quite a few layers right here. I do like to increase my stitch length to around 3.5 to 4. Just like it to be a little bit longer because this is just a real pretty decorative stitch. It's just going to basically hold everything in place. Okay. I also recommend when you are doing this project that you use cotton thread. You're touching things that are hot. You don't want these threads to melt, so I recommend that you use 100% cotton when you're doing all of your stitching on this, from doing your quilting to even when you go to sew all of the pieces together. I think that just kind of makes sense, particularly if you're dealing with, these are going to be touching hot things. I don't have no rhyme or reason. I'm just going to go straight stitching all the way across. Like to take a look at the back and see if there's a spot that I might need to fill in. I think I see one I'm going to do right here. And I think that's all the pieces that I need to do to get this done. I could probably do one more, maybe across the bottom here. It's just up to you how you want it to look. think I need one more. Okay, so here are my two pieces that you can see from the back side. So the next thing is to just take these two and we're going to place them right sides together, and this is where you can pull out some clips. I just kind of line up all of my edges and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch all the way around. Now this might be a time where I might need to do a little trimming because it's changed it just a little bit right here, because you're going to be sewing 1/4 inch, so I'm going to be wanting to be sure I catch all that in so bright. So I'm just trimming it a little bit. That's only if yours had to shift it a little bit. I can just do this little bit right here. And so when I go to sew it at that 1/4 inch, it's all going to catch it in there. I like to start on the bottom and just work all the way around. Now when I get to where I'm doing the thumb right here, I like to kind of do a pretty big rounded curve right here. I do not come down and then point to a point and then pivot, because that's going to put too much stress right here on that seam at that point of that thumb. So I like to come around and then I do a gradual curve and then coming up around as I'm going around the thumb part. So I'm very careful at that point so that it doesn't put too much stress right there on it. Like I said, you could go ahead and you could clip these. I'm just going to hold them all together and stitch this all the way around. Get that stitch length right. This is where I'm curving it. Big kind of a loop. And before I trim it, I make sure I've caught everything on both sides, all the way around. So now I'm going to take my my little precision scissors, and I'm going to clip right here at that thumb where we did that curve. Clip really close to my seam, being careful not to cut my stitches. And I will actually take some of that bulk and I will cut it out. It's just a little bit much right there. Just trim it out. Be sure to clip that curve. Be sure you got it nice and clipped. And then with my, grab my pinking shears, you can clip all your curves or you can grab your pinking shears. I'm just going to grab the pinking shears and I'm just going to go ahead and just cut the curves. I'm not worried about the straight areas. I'm just cutting around the curves here. Being careful to not cut into your stitches. These go together pretty quickly. I've made like 4 or 5 of them today so far. They go together real quick. So it's a really great beginner's project. Okay, got everything ready. So now we're just going to take it, we're just going to flip it out. You don't flip out the lining one, you just flip out the outer piece and push out all of your edges. Actually using the pinking shears to help push out that thumb, because somebody told me that was a great idea. And it is. It worked very well. I also have my knitting needle, and I'm just going to run it all along my seams, and I'm pushing all of those seams out. Pushing everything out around the hand, all the way around. Just give it a good push. So there we are, almost done. Now we're going to grab the lining. And you would have done the same thing. You would have sewed all the way around, except on that straight edge, you're going to leave about a 2-inch opening. So you're going to back tack there, sew all the way around. You're going to clip the thumb, remove some of that bulk, and then you're going to clip around all of your curves, which I just did by pinking shears around the thumb and around the hand part. I did not flip it out. So now you're going to go ahead and take your piece here, your hand, your mitt, and you're going to slip this over or into the lining like you're putting on a glove over a glove. You're just going to slide it all the way in as far as you can get it. Once you get it to that point, you're just going to be looking to line up your edges here. You might need to slide it back a little bit, but we're going to now be sewing all the way around the edges here. We're going to line up the edges right here, your seams. I'm going to kind of match up my seams, and that would be a good place where you could put a clip, or you could put a pin right there just to hold it, hold that seams together. Line up all the edges and then line up the seam on the other side. It should all fit together quite nicely. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch all the way around the bottom. I'm on a flatbed machine, so I am going to be stitching from the inside out. If you have a machine that has a removable arm, that would be a good time to use that, but it's still going to be a tight fit. So this is a really good technique to learn to sew, like if you have something that's really small that you could sew it from the back side. So I'm going to probably start somewhere in the middle here, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch, making sure all of my edges are lining up, and I'm going to sew all the way around and back tack when I get to the other end. Following this curve of the lining. It kind of curves up a little bit right here, so I'm going to follow that curve up. And then I'm going to pivot and come back around. Coming up onto the other curve. Be sure to move your pin so you don't sew your pin. Follow that up. And then pivot back around. And this is why we left our opening. So we have that all the way done. You could trim it up if you want. Let's give it a little trim right through here. making sure I've caught everything all the way around. Find my opening, and now I'm just going to reach in and I'm just going to grab it and pull it out. We call this birthing the baby. We are birthing the baby. Pull it all the way out. Now this is where I like to go to my iron and we do a really quick press. So I'm pushing out all the seams on the lining, including the thumb and the hand part. So I'm going to walk you over to the iron. We're going to do a quick press right here, and then we're going to sew that little piece closed right there. So right here, I've got my little opening right here, so I'm just kind of putting my fingers in there and I'm just kind of pulling it apart, just giving it a little pressure, and it will kind of fold those seams in. Getting all my strings inside because I don't want to see those. Giving it a little pull, and it kind of makes it nice and straight. I'm going to hit that with my iron and just kind of give the whole thing a little bit of a press right here. Making sure all of everything's all pulled out. You don't really see the lining, but it's going to be tucked up inside. So now we got that little opening. We got to do something about that. So you can hand stitch that, or you can stitch that closed with your sewing machine. So I'm going to go back, and I'm just going to sew that little opening closed about 1/8 of an inch right there along that edge. Okay, go ahead and clip any of my threads. And now you're going to just take this and push it back in. Just takes a little bit of finagling to get it all pushed down in there, particularly at the thumb part. That pushed into there. You'll feel it kind of moving around as you're getting it pushed into place. Roll your seams a little bit. Now you could take this to the iron and you can iron this nice and flat once you get everything all rolled out. And like I said earlier, you can go ahead and top stitch this if you so want to. I just kind of like that look of a faux binding on here, so I just push everything out. And I think that's it. I think this is a really cool one. What do you think about that one? This would be a great one for a college kid, teenagers. I think they'd really like this one. This one's, anybody that you know that's really musical, this would really, be a nod to them. So, like I said, these come in the 2 different sizes. This one here was the adult. Again, remember, if you're going to be doing a lot of quilting, I would quilt your pieces first before I would cut it out, and then I would go ahead and sew it all together that way. You can add a tab. I didn't even talk about that. It'd be real easy to add a little tab here. I would probably cut about, I guess if I was to do a tab, you would put it in between the lining and your outer piece as you were doing your stitching all the way around the edge there. I would probably cut maybe a 3 by 6 inch piece, do a double fold, sort of like a little miniature binding. This one here was attached after the thought. This was actually put on where we put some binding on it. This one here was actually sewn into it. And if I would have done this differently, I probably would have had my little tab on the opposite side of my thumb. I think it would have hung just a little bit better. But that's it. I hope you enjoy making these. They literally take minutes to do. I mean, you can whip out 4 or 5 in a short amount of time. It's a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on making the oven mitt in the 2 different ways, and I talked about other ways that you could do it. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.